Welcome to Email OSINT Roundup number 8. Today we're going to talk about what is the point of Russia targeting civilian buildings. Will Seaburn or NBC, this is nuclear, biological, chemical weapons, ever be used in modern war? How the war in Ukraine will affect doctrine for other nations. Rebuilding the U.S. military from the ground up. EMP and land invasion. And my opinion on Marine Force Design 2030 for the United States Marine Corps. So first, I have to start by saying I appreciate everybody who has joined my Substack. It's because of guys like you that hand me $5 every month and I'm able to do cool stuff like travel for some of these news stories. Also note that I work for Accenture Federal Services in my day job. My latest project ended on May 30th, so I'm on the bench right now, which means I'm looking for a new project at the company. So if you work for AFS and you need a cleared software engineer or BA or product owner or PM or cyber guy, or you work for Accenture's LLC and you need a guy like me to pinch hit for you guys for a few months doing some civilian projects, connect with me on Microsoft Teams. You know where to find me. All right, let's get started here. Pete asks, what is the point of Russia targeting civilian people and buildings besides creating fear and terror? I can't see how it helps them win the war. Why don't they just use all these missiles on military buildings and equipment? It makes no sense to me if they really want to destroy and win over Ukraine. So this is a hard question to answer. And I don't think that Russia is intentionally targeting civilians all the time. The problem with terror attacks and terror bombings is that it doesn't work. The United States killed hundreds of thousands of Japanese in fire bombings, Japanese civilians in fire bombings, although people made the rationale of, well, some Japanese manufacture war equipment in their own homes. I mean, whatever makes you sleep at night, right? But we firebombed the heck out of Japanese cities and they still wouldn't quit. We had to drop the sun on them twice to get them to quit. So intentionally trying to produce civilian casualties is proven not to work when it comes to getting the enemy to surrender. I think that we got an uptick in the amount of civilian casualties and civilian buildings that were hit when Russia got that supply of Iranian Shahed drones. And that didn't really help the situation for civilians on the ground. And I think that Russia was just launching those things in going, well, let's see what these things can do. I wonder what they can do. Will it scare the populace? Will it send them to the peace table? Can these things be used on military targets? Can they hit things like bridges? What will they do to the bridges? So I think they were testing that stuff out. I also think that I don't believe that Russia necessarily intends to create civilian casualties, but I think that when they actually start shooting, if they cause civilian casualties, that's just no big deal to them. And you can kind of see that in how Russia treated Chechnya when the city of Grozny was essentially leveled to the ground with artillery. And if you were a civilian, well, you should have left, or not my problem. Missiles are expensive, so I don't think that Russia is firing a cruise missile intending for it to hit an apartment building. I think their problem is that cruise missiles are inaccurate. At least I know the KH-22, I think that has, I've heard the KH-22 has like a hit probability of 1 mile. I think that might be a little bit of propaganda there. I think it has like 100 to 300 meter accuracy. But I think that if you have a residential area that's near a factory or a bridge or some strategic point and cruise missiles are fired at those targets and you happen to be in a civilian apartment complex and you get hit with that missile instead of the building, I think Russia just goes, well, that's war. So I think there's kind of a different mindset. I don't think Russia is doing it intentionally all the time. I think that there is a certain dollar value or ruble value associated with these weapon systems, and they want to reserve them for military targets, but they're just not accurate enough, and civilians suffer the cost. Now, quick note, I am traveling to Fort Campbell, Kentucky in August to do an air assault with the Rakkasans, 3rd Brigade, 101st Airborne, and I have to pay for it out of my own pocket. So give me 60 seconds to pay the bills here and talk about Atlas VPN. Click the link in the description below and get Atlas VPN for 3 years with 3 months extra for only $1.83 a month. I travel a lot for my civilian job and for this channel, and when I travel, I use Atlas VPN to keep me safe when connecting to unknown Wi-Fi. In fact, I even use it on the plane when I get the in-flight Wi-Fi because I have no idea what satellite constellation that in-flight Wi-Fi is routing through. And when I book my flights, I use Atlas VPN to change my location because location-based price discrimination is a thing. You can try it yourself. Look at a flight from your location, then change your location and look at the price again. It's probably going to be different. Atlas VPN acts as a tunnel between you and the public internet that hackers and rogue government agents can't penetrate. So click the link in the description below and get Atlas VPN for 3 years with 3 months extra for only $1.83 a month. Okay, Sharp asks, how do you see wars being fought if Seaburn NBC is used? Why do you think Russia hasn't used any of their 4th generation agents yet, or even any agents? Do you think that Seaburn NBC will ever be used again like in World War I? Do you think bioweapons, pathogens, or toxins may be prevalent in the next war? Okay, so Seaburn stands for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. The radiological basically means a dirty bomb or any kind of bomb that has radioactive materials in it that doesn't blow up in a nuclear explosion. Why hasn't Russia used chemical weapons? Well, first of all, it would draw the ire of the entire world if they did. So that's kind of number one. The second reason is that supposedly Russia destroyed all its stocks of chemical weapons in 2017. They actually made a big deal about that they got it done before the United States. Now, the United States was a little more careful about destroying their chemical weapons, and we're still doing it. It is a slow process. Our deadline is December 31st, 2023, and we're almost there. So why hasn't Russia used chemical weapons? They might not have any. They might have really destroyed their stocks. Now, of course, Russia does have some chemical weapons, and so does the United States. Any nation that has chemical decontamination units has to have some chemical weapons so that units can practice detection of agents and practice decontamination of agents. But they don't have them in the quantities to actually use as a weapon. Now, when it comes to biological weapons, I don't think biological weapons are all that useful, especially since what we've seen recently with a virus that infected the entire world. We're actually able to create a vaccine fairly fast. And so creating some kind of genetically engineered biological weapon, number one, that's a great way to get hit with a nuclear weapon if you did something like that. And I think number two, our medical technology is pretty darn good, and we would be able to sequence the DNA of that particular biological weapon, figure out where it came from, and then take actions to develop a vaccine, and maybe take some kinetic actions on the country that did so. So I don't really see biological weapons as that useful. Nuclear weapons, kind of the same thing. Regarding nuclear weapons, like they do have some battlefield uses. There's absolutely a battlefield use for nuclear weapons. We practiced it. The United States practiced using nuclear weapons by using them to exploit a breakthrough. You detonate a nuclear weapon, and then you rush troops through the ground zero of that nuclear weapon. And it is a thing that you can do to exploit a breakthrough. Whether it's a good idea or not, whether it draws the ire of the entire world on you, that's kind of a different story. So I don't really see large nation states or established nation states using Seaburn against each other. I think that Seaburn can definitely be used as a terror weapon. I think it can definitely be used by some smaller or poorer nation states as a terror weapon, or even used as a weapon of war, because some other nation states might not have the chemical protective equipment that they need in order to survive a Seaburn threat. And that's actually kind of another thing. Chemical weapons aren't that useful because everyone in the military has a chemical suit. It's issued to you, or it's issued to you at least before you go overseas, before you get deployed. And these suits are pretty darn good. I mean, there are pictures of people who are actually in a chemical environment decontaminating stuff with live chemicals that could kill you. So I could see a nation state using a chemical weapon against another nation state that doesn't have good CBRN capabilities. Maybe that's a possibility, but I don't really see large nations using chemical weapons against each other, at least a peer or near-peer threat. All right, Ahtisham asks, how will the Ukraine conflict impact the doctrines of other countries? So I think the conflict in Ukraine has changed quite a number of things. I think, for one, artillery is more important than ever. Long-range precision fires and even just general preparatory bombardments have eaten up a lot of stocks of artillery. We really need to focus on using artillery and using long-range precision fires. Another thing we need to think about is manufacturing capacity. I think just recently, a black powder plant in Louisiana blew up, and the United States still uses black powder in some of the primers for our artillery systems. And there's only one supplier of that black powder. So that caused a problem when that factory essentially shut down and black powder couldn't be used to manufacture shells. So I think another lesson learned is that every country needs its own manufacturing capacity for shells and its own source to develop the steel and explosives needed to make these shells work. Another thing we have to worry about is CASEVAC and MEDEVAC. One of the things that we noticed in Iraq and Afghanistan is that we had safe areas. Yeah, FOBs will get mortared. Look, I've been mortared before, but I haven't been mortared. Hell, I haven't even been in combat. Compared to what's going on in Ukraine, I haven't been in combat. I know nothing. So, you know, in Iraq or Afghanistan, a mortar might land on the forward operating base when you go, oh crap, what was that? You know? Or you might get hit with an IED. But you know, the bases that you're at are for the most part, safe. Well, that might be going away. We're going to have to figure out how to treat casualties literally at the point where they were wounded, because there might not be a way to get casualties back to hospitals like we had in Iraq and Afghanistan. There literally may be no safe area due to the adversary's precision fires. So that's something to think about, how MEDEVAC and CASEVAC are going to be handled in the future, where there may be no safe areas or hospitals may be considered a target by an adversary. Okay, Alexandar asks, if someone was to rebuild the U.S. military to be more effective long-term, what would you do? Beards, pot, better food. From someone who never served in one area, what I can consider is that there are a lot of overlapping jobs. Green Beret, Delta Force, Navy SEALs, Air Combat Controllers don't train people or as many people for jobs that are being done by contractors. I don't know if I would make a lot of changes to rebuilding the military. And really, I can only speak for the Army. That's you know, I don't know what challenges the Air Force faces with their rank structure or how their flights are organized and such. I'm not good at everything. But I can talk a little bit about the Army, and I'm going to kind of focus on that. You mentioned there's a lot of overlapping jobs like Green Beret, Delta, SEALs. Well, there actually isn't a lot of overlap. Green Berets are really teachers. Yeah, they can fight, but they're really teachers. They go into an area and they teach people how to fight for themselves. Delta Force is counter-terror. SEALs have a littoral mission set that is like unmatched by the other branches. Literally, the other branches can't do what the SEALs do. Air Combat Controllers, they bring their own distinct knowledge of how to control aircraft into the fight. So I don't really know if there is a lot of overlap there. Regarding the Army, I kind of think that the Army should bring back specialist ranks, specialist 5 through 7. There are some soldiers who don't want to lead. They just don't want to lead. They don't want to be a sergeant. They don't want to be a leader. And they're not good at being leaders. But they're really good at firing the 240 Bravo. They're really good at firing a tow missile, or they're really good parachute riggers. And they don't want any responsibility. They just want to do that job really well. I also think that adding a warrant officer as an EWO or electronic warfare officer into each company, at least in the infantry, probably in armor and artillery and other units as well, would be a positive boon for how the Army conducts electronic warfare operations, because now we're talking about ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. We need to fuse all this sensor information to one place, and ideally a warrant officer would be a great job for that person that fuses all this intelligence and sensor information in one place. Regarding contractors, I think contractors have their place, but they're very risk averse. You know, I can send a soldier to do something that a contractor would just say no to. Now do know that I met some amazing contractors in Iraq, like the guys at the Armadillo shop who used to repair our Humvees. I could walk up to one of those dudes and say, hey, I need a quart of blood. And he would like open his vein up, you know, to give me a quart of blood for my Humvee. But there are some contractors that don't want to go into a dangerous area. So yeah, you might be wondering, like, why does the Army have plumbers? Why does the Army have HVAC technicians? We can contract that stuff out. Yeah, but can we? Can we in a combat zone? Like, they might be fine in a FOB, but they might not want to move forward with soldiers. Next up, Andrew asks, I read 1 second after a novel where EMP, electromagnetic pulse weapons, were detonated over the continental U.S., bringing the U.S. back to the 19th century. What would happen if Russia or China invaded in that scenario? How would the M4 Javelin and M1 Abrams fare? So there's a lot of misconceptions about EMP or electromagnetic pulse and how EMP actually works. I touched on this in my video about nuclear weapons, so here's a section on EMP, and here's me in a different shirt.
I want to touch on electromagnetic pulse for a moment. All nuclear weapons emit an electromagnetic signature. When a nuclear weapon is detonated in the atmosphere, the gamma rays ionize air molecules. The electrons that are cut loose from this ionization are caught in the Earth's magnetic field and start to spiral down toward the poles. This, along with the spinning of electrons, essentially acts as a generator, and electromagnetic energy in the radio frequency is released. This is the EM in EMP. These radio waves will move until they find an antenna. And the U.S. power grid, with its 160,000 miles of copper wire, is basically the biggest antenna you can imagine. Now, back in 1962, America actually detonated a nuclear weapon in space during the Starfish Prime test just to see what would happen. And we knew there was going to be EMP, we just didn't know how much. The weapon was launched from this island in the Pacific, and the resultant pulse blew out streetlights in Honolulu 500 miles away. Needless to say, we were surprised. And in a way, it's a good thing we didn't test this in a higher latitude, because the magnetic field lines would have more curvature. And any portion of the U.S. mainland that was in sight of that would have had a front row seat to the EMP party. Now, the truth is that we really don't know how EMP would affect modern electronics, and the modern power grid does have safety precautions against more frequent surges of EMP. We call it lightning. Lightning strikes the U.S. 40 million times a year, and we're doing pretty okay. So while EMP effects might be a great way for a lazy writer to conveniently bring a story down to pre-industrial times, its effects on the ground might not be as dramatic. We just don't know.
Okay, if you want to watch that video on nuclear weapons, it'll be available at the end of this one and in the pinned comments below. Finally, Demango asks, what is your opinion on Force Design 2030? Force Design 2030 is essentially the Marine Corps' plan to be able to fight a littoral or in the shallows war against a near-peer adversary in a country that I don't know if I can name, because sometimes I get demonetized when I say their name. A couple of things. The Marine Corps is not Army Junior. The Marine Corps has always innovated because they've had to. They're a smaller service. They invented close air support, the Higgins boat, vertical envelopment off of helicopter carriers. They're thinking about creating Marine computer programmers. And these Marine computer programmers would be able to develop software that they could push out to the warfighter. If the warfighter goes, you know, it'd be really neat to have an app that did whatever, these Marine Corps guys would code it, push it out. The Marine Corps invented the Cyber Auxiliary, of which I'm a member. I still get emails from these guys who ask for help, like, hey, do a cyber event. The Marine Corps knows that in order to fight the next war, they have to remain innovative. So what they're essentially focused on is small units operating in an austere environment and long-range precision fires. There are people who complain that why did the Marine Corps give up their snipers? Well, because now their sniper is a scout, and instead of a sniper rifle, they have a HIMARS that's going to hit a target from X number of miles away. So the Marine Corps is willing to give up some aviation assets, some armor assets, in order to do better at this very unique role that the Marine Corps is perfectly suited for, and that is combat in the littorals and operating in an austere environment, moving from island to island to island, and giving that near-peer enemy, whose name I can't say because then I get demonetized, heartache, and ultimately winning. So that's kind of what I think of Force Design 2030. I think the Marine Corps is on the right path. They are not Army Junior. And ultimately, the Marine Corps is going to make the correct decisions and be a very lethal force moving forward. And that's pretty much it for today. Hey, if you want to support the channel, head on over to my Substack. It costs me $5. Go get a t-shirt from Bunker Branding. I hope to have the Department of the Boat People t-shirts out soon. I just got to hear back from Bunker Branding. And thank you guys so much for watching.
Hey everyone! New Ryan McBeth t-shirts and hoodies from Bunker Branding are available. I'm going to get the HIMARS shirt. What are you going to get, Donald? The Patriot shirt, because I'm a patriot. It's the best shirt, the biggest shirt. Make 14 tangos great again. What are you going to get, Barack? Let me be clear. I'm going to get a Drone Sweet Drone shirt. What about you, George?
I'm going to get a Knife Hand shirt because they're weapons of mass destruction. What about you, Billy?
Oh, I'm going to get a Landmine Marker shirt because my presidency always blew up in my face.
I'll tell you what I'm going to get.
Ronald Reagan, but you're dead.
I came back to tell you that no matter our politics, we're all Americans. And we should buy Ryan's hoodies and t-shirts because they pay for the stock footage and licenses that allow him to make awesome content. So come on down to Bunker Branding and buy a Ryan McBeth t-shirt or I'll start the bombing in 5 minutes.